You're telling people you work with, I don't want you even to be next to me. Like, I have such disdain for you that I'm annoyed by your presence.
His TV talk show.
Okay, this was the one he had on NBC just recently.
Whatever, yeah. The one that damn, who took his show from him?
Kelly Clarkson.
How can Kelly Clarkson take your show?
Heard you go on the air and you said, my sister done burnt too many bridges and there's nothing I can do for her now. Steve, do you know how hurt I was?
Side of him. I think he's still that same Steve. He's still that. But now you're also seeing another side of him that he never had to.
Steve Harvey's story sounds perfect on TV. He's the guy who says he came from nothing, slept in his car, hustled his way up, kept his faith, and turned himself into a brand. Talk shows, Family Feud, books, radio, speeches. He sells himself like living proof that grind and God will carry you. But the comedians who came up around him are telling a different story now that they're finally speaking on him.
By the way, this is the same guy who rails against people who don't believe in his particular voodoo. Right?
Against gay people.
Against gay people, against Asians.
And that version is not so clean. Behind the sharp suits and the I'm here to motivate you image, they say there were burned bridges, stolen material, and quiet moves behind the scenes. Some comics are even calling him a hypocrite, someone who gets on camera and tells people how to live while playing way dirtier than he lets on.
You know, my thing with Steve Harvey is that he used my material on both his platforms.
Yeah.
After I talked to him, I saw him at Def Jam, I went up and talked to him, I said, man, you're using my material.
The biggest accusation is about jokes. A lot of comedians treat joke stealing like the ultimate line you don't cross. And multiple people over years have said Steve crossed it. Mark Curry, the star of Hanging with Mr. Cooper, says Steve didn't just copy a style, he took full routine. Curry says he watched Steve go on TV and perform a Halloween story about being too broke for a costume and having to walk around in a cardboard box pretending to be a UPS worker. Curry says that wasn't Steve's story at all. That was his real childhood, his real memory, and suddenly Steve was out there doing it like it happened to him. That's where the doubt starts. Because if you're willing to take somebody's real life story and present it as your own on national TV, that's not just inspiration, that's branding yourself with somebody else's life, and this isn't the only complaint.
This is like Steve Harvey telling people he used to be homeless. That's my story. That's not his story. Steve Harvey wasn't never homeless. When Mark Curry was touring with him 25 years ago, he was making $3,000 a show in cash and doing 5 shows a week. They just tell the stories. Thanks to my wife, I'm where I am. You said that about the first wife. You forget that? You told us it was her. Then you went and married somebody else that think like a man. Like, what are you talking about? They think they can rewrite history.
Other comics have said Steve's whole "I was the underdog, I had nothing" story is exaggerated. They claim he wasn't this powerless outsider. He knew how to get in certain rooms early and he knew how to position himself. Basically, they're saying the public gets the polished version, the survivor, the humble success story. But inside comedy, people remember a guy who was aggressive, strategic, and not always loyal. So now there are 2 Steves, the one the audience loves and the one other comedians say they had to deal with.
Bernie said in the GQ article that when he got Ocean's 11, Steve had reached out to the producer and said he thought he would be a better fit and tried to get the part and blah, blah, blah. And that was that, we just...
And to understand why they talk about him like that, you've got to go back to where it all started. The late 80s and early 90s, when he was still just another comic fighting for stage time. To understand why comics are still mad at Steve Harvey, you have to go back to the late 80s and early 90s when he wasn't Steve Harvey the brand.
Comedians don't appreciate their jokes being stolen, and Steve Harvey has rubbed several comedians the wrong way. Well, it looks like Harvey has found himself in some trouble.
No Halloween costume. I think we UPS, I guess. I don't know.
You've heard me say that every Halloween I had the same outfit on. I just had a brown box. And he just told me to tell everybody I was the UPS man.
My material on his show, so I had a beef on that.
On what show?
When he was on the bullshit talk show he had, and he did all my Halloween material one Halloween.
He says he knows that Steve Harvey stole his Halloween bit because it was a personal story. He was talking about himself growing up.
This cat is hot. Please put your hands together for Katt Williams.
Saying you are not supposed to be at the gas station making life decisions.
Can't even pump gas like you used to no more.
If you put $15 in your tank, you had time to bond with your vehicle. You had time to put the nozzle in and
put the nozzle in there and hit it.
set the clicker and look through your car and clean off the dashboard and
Be sitting there talking, be on your phone. Hey, what's happening? Be walking around, cleaning the windshield.
run in the store, get some Pringles and a Snapper, and it'll still be pumping.
Okay, you go in there, bring me a wine cooler. Bring me a cooler, dog. Not no more.
You can't even turn around good for that son of a bitch click. Just soon as you put it in, just click, click.
Get in there and start it up, and you can't believe that damn needle is a quarter tank of gas.
He was just another stand-up on the black comedy circuit, doing clubs in places like Chicago, Cleveland, Atlanta, the kind of rooms where you either killed or you got booed off stage in front of everybody. And he wasn't alone. That era was packed. You had Bernie Mac, D.L. Hughley, Cedric the Entertainer, Monique, Mark Curry, Katt Williams coming up, and a bunch of other names that never got TV deals but were killers on stage. Everybody was hungry. Everybody was trying to get seen. Everybody was trying to get out of small rooms and into national rooms. But there was still a code.
We going through something, we'll call each other because we feel for each other, because we know the real person.
Right. Yeah.
I know they lying about you online. I know that podcast is bullshit. Hang in there, dog. Don't pay no attention to that.
Yeah.
Because, and look, man, just because you can talk smooth without saying, it don't mean you ain't lying.
Right.
I be sitting up here looking at these podcasts of these other comedians that's going on talking about other comedians. Hold up, dog. Where did that shit come from? When did we become that? When did we get into tear each other down business? Because you ain't never heard me say not a disparaging remark against another comedian nowhere. You ain't heard him or him. Because we ain't cut from that cloth.
Right.
So what is your motive for doing this here? And you're not going to tear him down. And look, man, I got a real platform.
In that world, you can be loud, you can be wild, you can even talk trash about another comic on stage. But there's one thing you do not do. You don't take another comedian's material. That's automatic disrespect. That's like stealing someone's identity. Because in stand-up, especially back then, your material was literally your career. Your story was the thing feeding you. And this is exactly where the smoke around Steve Harvey starts.
Harvey is on his third marriage. His third wife was mistress to his second wife.
He got it. Everybody thinks Steve Harvey some stand-up man. No, I'm a kiss the old girl who owned TV One. He used to kiss her. He had the radio show out.
It was hot. We had the Steve Harvey show, so we had a national TV show. Bernie Mac was the it comedian at the time, and then DL was hot. He had a TV. But the first year we did it, it was just me, Bernie, and Steve.
Right.
And Steve closed.
You did the first part, and then the second part.
I think, of course, that was, definitely a contributing circumstance, but also.
Like me, like Oprah, Tyler, Lee Daniels, and I gotta put my brother Steve on the list. Y'all knew I was not wrong.
Love every time, had him on the show every time. But if you're gonna do another stick, just tell the brother that you're sticking. Dog, I'm gonna be dogging you on the list.
People in that scene still say Steve would watch what other comedians were doing, take the parts that hit the hardest, clean them up, and then go do them in bigger space. It wasn't just, we're both talking about being broke. It was word for word setup, personal angle, stuff that sounded like somebody's real life. And once he did it on a platform with actual cameras, that joke basically became his because now the world heard it from him first. It didn't stop at jokes either. You started hearing stories about Steve calling producers directly and trying to position himself for roles other comics were already being looked at for. There were rumors that when Bernie Mac started popping in Hollywood, Steve was talking to people behind the scenes trying to convince them he'd be a better fit. That gave people the feeling that Steve wasn't just competing, he was stepping over whoever he had to step over. So while most comics were out here just trying to get booked, Steve was already playing something way bigger. He was treating it like business. And that's when people started saying, yeah, he's funny, but watch him. And then one comedian finally said it in public, not backstage, not in a green room, not in a bar after the show. He said it on record. He said, Steve Harvey stole my act. That was Mark Curry. And once Mark said that, people actually started listening. Mark Curry isn't some random YouTuber looking for attention. He was the star of Hanging with Mr. Cooper. He's been doing stand-up for decades, and he came up in the same generation as Steve. So when he talked about Steve Harvey, people paid attention. Curry said flat out, Steve Harvey stole my routine. Not inspired by, not we had similar jokes, but stole it, televised it, and acted like it was his own life. The example he keeps bringing up is the Halloween bit. Curry says he used to tell this story on stage about growing up without money and having to go trick-or-treating wearing a cardboard box, pretending to be a UPS guy because his family couldn't afford a real costume. According to Curry, that wasn't just a joke he wrote, that was his actual childhood, that was his story. Then he says he turned on Steve Harvey's show and saw Steve doing that exact story to a national audience as if it happened to Steve. That's why Curry was heated, because once somebody performs your story on national TV, it's no longer your story in the eyes of the audience. Now it's Steve's funny Halloween story. If you try to do it after that, you look like the thief. And Curry says he confronted Steve about it. He told him, "You're using my material," and nothing changed. That's the part that had other comedians nodding like, yeah, that sounds familiar, because this wasn't some isolated one-time situation. Over the years, different comics, especially guys who weren't as big as Steve, have said the same kind of thing. He'll take your angle, smooth it out, then present it clean and safe for TV. You're still in the club trying to get 200 people to care, and he's on daytime selling it to millions like it's his original truth. And the crazy part, when people call him out, Steve doesn't really get into detail. His public stance is more like, why are all these comedians tearing each other down? He'll frame it like the real problem is other comics going public and talking negative instead of admitting anything specific. He'll say real professionals shouldn't sit around bashing each other online like he's above the drama. That sounds good in an interview, but to the people accusing him, it feels like he's flipping the story. Now they look bitter and messy and he looks calm and mature. And it wasn't just Curry talking. Katt Williams went at Steve too. Katt said Steve Harvey doesn't just copy jokes, he copies style, lanes, even personality. He pointed at Steve's whole TV persona and said Steve built that by taking from people around him and packaging it as this clean, buttoned up, I'm the grown man in the room act. Katt even said Steve tried to stand on Bernie Mac's shoulders and crown himself the king. That part hit people hard because of who we're talking about, the original kings of comedy. If you remember, Steve Harvey, Bernie Mac, Cedric the Entertainer, and D.L. Hughley did the Kings of Comedy tour and film. That project turned them into legends. It put them in the mainstream, not just as funny guys, but as culture. On stage, it looked like brotherhood, 4 black comedians on top together, supporting each other. But after Bernie Mac passed, people started looking back at old clips and interviews differently. You started hearing all these quiet stories that Steve was a lot more competitive than he pretended to be. Fans said Steve acted like he was the face, while Bernie was the one people actually felt in their chest. Katt Williams pushed that angle even harder. He said Bernie was the people's champ and Steve was the TV champ. Translation, Bernie was loved, Steve was managed. That's when this stops sounding like just a joke thing and starts sounding like career positioning. Because now it's not just he took one of my bits, now it's he took momentum, he took energy, he took lane. And that leads straight into the next question other comics keep hinting at. Is Steve Harvey funny or is Steve Harvey strategic? Even his own peers, guys who have known him for years, will tell you the same thing in different words. Steve doesn't just get on stage and tell jokes. Steve knows how to move. He knows how to make himself the safe one in the room. He knows how to play to executives, sponsors, networks, older audiences, church folk, all at the same time. D.L. Hughley said something that low-key explains all of this. Steve knows how to survive in any room. That sounds like a compliment, but if you read between the lines, it's also a warning, because surviving in every room usually means somebody else doesn't. Here's the part a lot of comedians agree on. Steve Harvey can survive anywhere. Put him in a raw comedy club with a tough crowd, he'll talk like he's from the struggle. Put him in a boardroom with network executives, he'll talk like a businessman. Put him on daytime TV in front of suburban moms, he'll talk like a safe father figure with old school value. He can switch fast, and that's not me saying it, that's what other comics who worked around him say. D.L. Hughley described it like this: Steve knows how to move in any room and protect his spot. That sounds smooth until you really break down what that means. Because when somebody can be one person in front of you and a different person in front of the people who control the money, that's power, that's leverage. And that's also what some comics call dangerous. The story that keeps coming up is this: Steve will laugh with you, call you brother, act like everything's all love, and then the next day he's meeting with the same people you're trying to meet, pitching the same kind of ideas you've been working on. So by the time you finally get in the room, they're already looking at him as the more professional version of you. That's how you go from doing clubs to landing national TV, not because you were the only funny one, but because you came off as the one the network could trust. And when you stack that next to the accusations about taking jokes and flipping personal stories, you start seeing a pattern. It's not just about being funny, it's about positioning. It's about getting there first, locking it in, and leaving everybody else to argue about it after the fact. That's also why a lot of Steve's old relationships in comedy didn't last. As his career went up, a lot of people around him quietly fell off. You hear people say Steve doesn't really keep friends, he keeps opportunity, meaning once you can't boost the image or can't help the brand, you're not close anymore. And this is where people say you really see who he is, when money, power, and loyalty all collide on camera. Because there was one moment where Steve Harvey stopped talking like a motivational speaker and started talking like a survivor. It happened sitting across from someone he was supposed to stand with, Monique. For a lot of people, Monique is the moment where Steve Harvey stopped sounding like a motivational speaker and started sounding like a businessman. Monique said Hollywood tried to shut her out. She said she was blackballed for not playing along, for not staying quiet, for not letting powerful people control her. She expected the big names, especially the ones who knew how that game works, to back her up publicly. Instead, she sat down with Steve on TV, and what she got wasn't protection, it was strategy. Steve told her straight, this is the money game. He said you can't blow up the machine if the machine is how you feed your family. He basically told her the fight she's trying to have in public is the kind of fight that can cost you everything. He made it clear he's not willing to risk his position like that. Monique pushed back and said there's also an integrity game. She said if you bend every time a studio wants you to bend, you lose who you are. She was talking about self-respect. Steve was talking about survival. People watching that interview heard two totally different values. Monique was saying, stand with me. Steve was saying, be careful, you're messing with the people who sign check. And that's the part that made a lot of fans turn their head. Because up to that point, Steve's public image was loyalty, faith, brotherhood. We gotta stand together. But in that moment, it sounded like he was saying loyalty is cool until it threatens the bag. For Monique, it felt like betrayal. She treated Steve like a friend. He answered like an executive. For everybody else, it confirmed what other comedians had already hinted. Steve will smile with you, joke with you, call you sister, brother, family. But when it comes down to money and access, he's choosing the side that keeps him in every room. And once you hear him call it the money game out loud, a lot of the other stories about him start making more sense. Suddenly, it doesn't sound random that Mark Curry says Steve took his personal routine and did it on TV. It doesn't sound random that people say Steve would sit around joking with you, then go meet your agent without you. It doesn't sound random that Katt Williams says Steve slid in and tried to claim the king spot after Bernie Mac. Because if you believe Steve operates by the money game, then none of that is accidental. It's policy. And that's why people say Steve isn't just talented, he's calculated. But if that's true, the next question is, how far did he take it? Here's the part you can't deny. Steve Harvey won the long game. He went from stand-up to national TV. He hosts game shows. He ran his own talk show. He does radio. He writes bestsellers. His clips about how to move in life go insanely viral because he talks like someone who already solved it. He's basically positioned himself as the authority, not just a comedian, but a man you're supposed to listen to. And because that image is so strong, most accusations don't stick to him in the mainstream. That's what frustrates other comics. They feel like they watched how he moved, they watched who got pushed aside, and they watched him turn all of it into, see, God had a plan for me. Meanwhile, they're sitting there like, God had a plan or you had a plan. A lot of the people who were around him early don't describe Steve as this warm mentor figure. They describe him as someone who figured out how to become untouchable, someone who learned early how to talk to executives, how to look safe for TV, how to make himself the grown-up in any room. And once he locked in that role, nobody else in that lane could really compete with him, because he wasn't just selling jokes anymore, he was selling trust. That's also where the he doesn't keep friends, he keeps opportunities talk comes from. You'll hear people who worked with him say they felt used, then replaced. You'll hear people say Steve will show love to you in public, then quietly move past you when he's done getting what he needs. It's not emotional, it's transactional. Even the situations with Mark Curry and Katt Williams feed that same idea. Curry says Steve took his actual life story and performed it to a bigger audience like it was his own. Katt says Steve built part of his image off people like Bernie Mac. Then once Bernie was gone, Steve positioned himself like the last king standing. The message behind both is the same. Steve doesn't just want to shine, he wants to own the lane. And then on top of that, you've got the personal criticism. You've got people pointing out how Steve talks about faith, marriage, family values, doing right, while also having messy relationship history, drama from past marriages, rumors, controversy. You've got people calling him out for preaching morals in public while doing business moves in private that don't look moral at all. To his supporters, none of that matters. They see a successful black man who beat the system, feeds a lot of people, and still shows up every day. They'll say, of course people are jealous. Of course people are going to lie on his name. He's rich, that's what happens. To his critics, that mindset is exactly the problem, because it lets anything slide as long as you're winning. And that's where the word karma keeps coming up. The higher Steve climbs, the more old stuff keeps getting dragged back up. Old interviews, old comments, old behind-the-scenes story. It's like the past refuses to stay quiet. People who stayed silent when he was rising are suddenly talking now. People who never dared to call him out are calling him out by name. So yeah, he's winning. But the question people keep asking is, did he build that empire off hard work and talent, or off other people's work in silence? And that leads to the last part. At this point, there are two versions of Steve Harvey, and they're complete opposite. Version one is the public version, the redemption arc. The man who came from nothing, slept in his car, stayed loyal to his faith, kept pushing, and is now proof that discipline and prayer can turn a broke comic into a global brand. That version is clean. That version is safe. That version sells books. Version two is the version other comedians talk about when the cameras are off. That version is strategic. That version studies you, takes what works, and does it bigger. That version plays friendly in public and then moves behind the scenes to make sure he, not you, gets the meeting. That version tells you it's all love, then tells Hollywood, I'm the one you can trust. That version doesn't talk about loyalty. That version talks about access. And by now, it's not just one person saying this. It's Mark Curry saying saying Steve took his bit and put it on TV like it was his life. It's Katt Williams saying Steve crowned himself king off other men's momentum. It's Monique saying Steve chose the industry over her when it actually mattered. It's even DL Hughley, who's been cool with Steve for years, describing him as somebody who knows how to survive in any room, which is a nice way of saying he'll always protect his seat. So the debate isn't, is Steve Harvey successful? Obviously he is. The debate is, did he earn that success clean, or did he collect it from everybody around him and then call it the grind? Some people say the hate is jealousy from comics who didn't make it as far. Other people say jealousy has nothing to do with it. They just finally feel safe enough to tell the truth. And now for the first time, that second version of Steve Harvey is getting seen by regular viewers, not just people in the business. So now I'll put it on you. When you look at Steve Harvey, what do you see? A disciplined survivor who knew how to move in rooms nobody else could get into? Or a smooth operator who took jokes, took lanes, took moments, and then preached loyalty after the fact? Do you think the comedians calling him out are bitter and reaching? Or do you think they're finally saying what everybody in that circle always knew but couldn't say when his career was still peaking? Drop your take in the comments, because the funny part is comedy is all about timing, and all of these voices coming out at the same time, that timing is not random.